Mark Dice obliterates Dan Bongino after his departure as deputy director of the FBI, calling him a sad sellout who has prioritized podcasting over meaningful political action. So Mark Dice is actually destroying Dan Bongino over Bongino's failure to expose corruption within the agency and of his alignment with the neoconservative interests. So it seems to me that Mark Dice is exposing Dan Bongino from drifting away from that which is important. So here is Mark Dice actually absolutely going scorched earth in an epic rant. Let's go ahead and get right into it.
Dan Bongino is expected to return to his podcast today after quitting as the deputy director of the FBI, the second in command of the Federal Bureau of Incompetence, after less than a year. But instead of becoming a whistleblower and telling the American people how pathetic Kash Patel, the poop-throwing diversity hire head of the FBI, is, and how incompetent Pam Bondi is, who isn't even fit to run a Starbucks, let alone the Department of Justice, both of whom continue to cover up the Epstein files. Remember when she duped a bunch of Twitter personalities into coming to the White House and gave them binders of old, already published documents, which actually were redacted unlike the originals, and thought that that would dupe the American people into believing that she released the Epstein files? But no, Dan Bongino is returning to take on the black pillars and the grifters, trying to, quote, hijack MAGA. Black pill, for those of you who don't know, is like a millennial term that the Zoomers really kind of took a hold of, meaning that someone is just kind of disillusioned and, kind of just frustrated with everything. So Dan Bongino, a guy in his 50s, trying to sound like a Zoomer, he's taking on the black pillars. And he spent half the day yesterday in his big return to Twitter attacking Matt Gaetz, calling him an anti-Semite, and retweeting none other than Mark Levin. So it gives you a little preview of what the new Dan Bongino is going to be all about. Bongino spent half the day yesterday posting cringe memes, trying to hype up his return to his podcast, portraying himself as some sort of a hero like Braveheart. But the cringe didn't stop there. It culminated with him posting this deepfake meme depicting him as the gladiator. Okay, proudly returning to his podcast because he's a hero, instead of staying in a position of power and authority where he could direct criminal investigations into the deep state, into the Democrats. He's joining his podcast studio to complain about how corrupt the government is from behind a microphone. He also spent half the day blocking people who were critical of him and mocking him, as this user noted by posting this infamous video and captioning it, Dan Bongino blocking people today. After former Congressman Matt Gaetz joined in on the mockery, pointing out that Bongino had lost 3 attempted congressional campaigns, Bongino responded by calling him an anti-Semite and a piece of crap, and insinuating that Matt Gaetz was involved in Epstein-like activities, which was an Israeli and Democrat smear against Gaetz, which was fully investigated even by the Biden FBI and Department of Justice, and they found that Gaetz did nothing wrong. But Dan Bongino is recycling that Israeli smear and retweeting, like I said, Mark Levin of all people, and a Mark Levin tweet, I guess all Mark Levin tweets about the woke Reich. There's this term that a bunch of neocons have been using lately. They're trying to get to stick, called the woke right, and a play on words is the woke Reich. And they're depicting, of course, anybody who doesn't worship Israel and treat Israel as a 51st state, or as the greatest country in the world, like Ben Shapiro and Mark Levin, as a Nazi. You are an anti-Semite. In case you didn't know what Dan Bongino's top priority in his life and his business is, here's a clip from when he launched his book Spygate years ago, talking about the corruption of the deep state, during an audience Q&A with his wife. So to be clear, this was not some Israeli podcast as he's shilling his book. This was his podcast, which was sponsored by a collectibles company, Premier Collectibles, in order to sell his autographed copies of his book. So this is his podcast with his wife fielding questions from the viewers. And this is his response to this interesting question.
What cause is dear to your heart?
Cause is dear to my Israel, the defense of Israel.
What is number?
Okay, his number one answer in what looks like a hostage video is Israel, the defense of Israel. Not saving America, restoring the republic, stopping the border, exposing the deep state, supporting the Republican agenda, kicking out all the illegal aliens, restoring the dollar to the gold standard. It's Israel. His number one response, the top thing on his list of things to do is to care and protect Israel. A podcast.
Man, I honestly admired, Dan Bongino for what he did back in 2023, 2024 and stuff. And now I'm seeing that he's no different than the others, And you know what? Mark Dice did a good job in actually laying this out and everything. And now I don't hate Dan Bongino. I don't have it in me to hate anybody. But you know what? I mean, let's be real here. I mean, Mark Dice is simply just stating there that, if you're going to go ahead and do these things and you take a high position, at least try to go ahead and never forget where you came from and who you're supposed to support. I mean, let's be real here. That's the very thing that Don, among others who, joined the administration, that they forgot. It seems to me that we were forgotten about them and stuff. And honestly, it seems like they really do care about the needs or the wants of the higher ups in the land that Ben Shapiro loves and stuff than America. I mean, he claims to be, MAGA. He claims to be, America first and stuff, or so I thought and everything. But the fact of the matter is that, he is not really that. And he's calling people grifters and black pillars. Seems to me he's a major grifter of them all. Or he might have had been a wolf in sheep's clothing or something. I mean, I could be wrong about it. Let me know your thoughts about that in the comments below if I'm wrong. But the fact of the matter is that if he shouldn't have taken that kind of position again in the first place, because you know what? I mean, he was saying all these good things to us and stuff, having us to rally to support Trump and stuff in elections and everything. And right as soon as he gets nominated to go ahead and be a part of be the director of the FBI and everything, well, not FBI, but a director in, in the Trump administration with the FBI, I mean, let's be real. We saw a different side of him. Like, just like Mark Dice said in the video earlier, that, the whole thing with the FBI as well as Pam Bondi releasing the Epstein files and stuff, that being completely fake and stuff, that's what made me disappointed the most. Okay, and I'm pretty sure you all are furious as well. And it comes to the fact that, we're tired of these voices, whether they're left or the right, telling us, what we want to hear, what they think we should hear and stuff, rather than telling and standing for the truth. I mean, it's that simple. If you don't want to be a part of that position, just say that. If you want to be there just for, the money, the power and stuff, the higher fame and everything, just stay out from the cause and stuff, and we ourselves need to get better at recognize these fools for who they really are, which are just, basically pretenders.
Pastor that was so afraid to admit Jeffrey Epstein's ties to Mossad, Israel's CIA, including the former head of the IDF, the Israeli Defense Force, staying with Epstein at his mansion for like weeks on end, that he played dumb and said that a source told him, when this is already widespread knowledge, okay? A source told him that Epstein worked, quote, for people in the Middle East. What country? I just don't know. And he said this in 2023. This clip is from mid-2023, when everybody in the country knew that Jeffrey Epstein worked for Mossad.
A year and a half after that, I'm in a green room at Fox, and I'm not going to say who because they didn't give me permission to share it, but the short story, but not who they are, says, Epstein's an intelligence asset for people in the Middle East, right? I'm like, no, I didn't know that.
Imagine not knowing that as a podcaster. We've known that for like 15 years, you moron.
I'm like, you sure of that? The person, let's say, is like, I'm absolutely sure of that. that he's either a witting or unwitting asset, intelligence asset, meaning his plane and that island.
Here he is explaining it to the dumbed down viewers that he's used to having listen to him, because they're obviously completely so out of touch. Again, in mid 2023, he has to break down like the boomer Fox News viewers, totally separate from the boomer viewers that I have. I actually met a fan of mine who is, I think he's like 95 years old, and him and his lady friend, as the seniors call their girlfriends, both huge fans of me. If you're watching right now, you know who you are. But Bongino is, talking down to the audience because he's used to those boomers who only watch Fox News, who don't even know how to, use a smartphone.
And the cameras, there's a big assumption out there that these videotapes were exclusively in the custody of Epstein. That's a huge mistake. The reason they wanted this story to go away is because there's an assumption like, oh yeah, Epstein had him. No, he wasn't the only one who had him, according to this source.
I have to emphasize again for the third time that this was mid 2023, and he is talking like he's making some big revelation. You're such a cutting edge journalist, Dan. I guarantee you that during his big debut, he's going to sing praises of Pam Bondi and poop thrower Kash Patel and say, well, just because you haven't seen any big major arrest doesn't mean that they're not working on it. He's going to help them kick the can down the road and until eventually nothing actually happens. And we can't forget that Pam Bondi and poop thrower Patel are part of the Epstein file cover-up. Remember when she said case closed? She said, oh, there's nothing else to see here. Let's just move on. And then took the Democrats in Congress, hoping that there was some dirt in there about President Trump, to then demand that they get released. And she said, okay, fine. I guess we'll release some of them. And then it really just showed more dirt on Bill Clinton. Okay. And these photos would have never seen the light of day if Pam Bondi had her way. There's Bill Clinton swimming in a pool with the madam, obviously, Ghislaine Maxwell, and a victim, which they blurred out. There's Bill with another victim there. Of course, Pam Bondi didn't want us to see these photos. Part of the same cabal as the Clinton crime family's part of. Pam Bondi, by the way, was the attorney general in Florida when Epstein was arrested. So part of the initial cover-up there as well. And these files were released like a few days before Christmas, just like a weekend news dump, hoping to sweep them under the rug. And still, what has been released is only 1% of the actual files.
Let's be real here. Back onto Bongino. Real reformers don't quit when the going gets tough. Okay, so by leaving the FBI's number 2 spot to return to a lucrative podcast deal and stuff, proved that he values his brand and bank account more than actually dismantling the deep state from within. Okay, and as far as the whole gatekeeper thing and stuff, but for from when he's talking about Matt Gaetz and stuff, by calling him an anti-Semite, Bongino is just seen as using the same cancel culture tactics that the left is using, effectively just doing the work of the establishment under the disguise of Make America Great Again. Okay. Now, also another thing is like supporting what Pam Bondi or even Kash Patel while they, kick the can down the road and stuff on the Epstein files. That's definitely a cover up to me. I don't know about you guys, but if Big Bongino had, had real dirt, he would have just released it or just used his power at the FBI to make arrests. Returning to a microphone right now is just a surrender, and it's definitely not a victory at all.
I don't want to hear any of this crap about how you don't want me infighting or attacking fellow right-wingers because we're supposedly all on the same side. If this guy is on your side, then you are not on my side, because this guy's on the side and has been on the side of covering up the Epstein files from day one, pretending that he just doesn't know what country Epstein was working for, pretending that he's revealing some big revelation when everybody already knew what was going on. And because I'm one of the truly independent YouTubers who also couldn't care less about going on other people's shows, other people's podcasts, I've been invited. I've turned down some of the biggest names in podcasting because I simply just don't care. I'm not going to take off 3 days of producing my own content. One day to fly there, one day to do the show, the next day to fly back, when I could just make more videos here and reach, in many cases, just as large of an audience. Not to mention, going and doing podcasts actually is really just an ego boost. It doesn't get a channel or a podcaster or a content creator more subscribers most of the time. You can go on the biggest podcast and people are there watching that podcast for that host. Very, very, this is like one of the little known secrets in the podcasting YouTube world. Very, very few people actually will watch that podcast and be like, wow, that was amazing. Let me go and subscribe to his YouTube channel. Let me go follow him on social media. So it's largely just an ego boost going on all of these other podcasts. So because I don't care and I've turned down going on a lot of these shows, I can tell you how I really think about them. Whereas most of these mainstream ones and even the independent content creators are going to bite their tongue because they don't want to offend any of these other hosts because they want to go on their shows thinking that that's going to boost their career, that's going to get them in front of a larger audience, which it will. But again, the translation from one podcast or one YouTube channel to another, very, very tiny. It's an illusion. So obviously, I don't care about any other podcast or any other YouTube host. I will attack those on the right. I will do punch right because why would we want to unite with people like this?
I mean, let's be real here. Mark Dice has just shown that the trust the plan area is over, okay? So Dan Bongino is now the PR agent for the FBI, as shown by Mark Dice here, tasked with pacifying the right-wing base while the DOJ continues to hide the Epstein files, okay? So Dan Bongino was likely given a choice as exposed by, basically by Mark Dice and others, where you either play ball and get your podcast back or be destroyed. Now, returning to the air with Dan Bongino returning to the airwaves with Levine's blessing, I mean, Mark Dice, others, and myself included, believe that he chose the former. So, yeah, basically, let me know your thoughts about this video on Mark Dice, who obliterated Dan Bongino, and I'll see you on the next one. Until then, peace.